Edition of Arirang News. I'm Mark Broom. Let's dive straight into the day's headlines. Almost 500 people dead, more than 24,000 infected, but not yet a pandemic. The WHO says the coronavirus isn't there yet. The agency says the strategy is still the same: extinguish human-to-human transmission of the virus. A step in the right direction. New test kits for quickly detecting the coronavirus win approval in South Korea. They'll be delivered to local private hospitals within the next 48 hours. Plus, after a technical glitch caused chaos, South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg has a narrow lead in the first Democratic Party caucus, with slightly under two-thirds reporting. Let's start with our continuing coverage of the coronavirus outbreak. The death toll from the coronavirus in China has reached 490, with the number of confirmed patients topping 24,000. According to Chinese state media CCTV on Wednesday, there were more than 3,000 newly confirmed cases and 65 deaths in Hubei province on Tuesday. In South Korea, 2 more patients were confirmed this morning, bringing the total number of confirmed patients here to 18. Meanwhile, South Korean health authorities are scrambling to figure out the movements of the country's 16th patient who returned from a trip to Thailand about 2 weeks ago. Kan Hyung-woo reports.
The Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention confirmed a 16th coronavirus case in South Korea on Tuesday. The patient is a 42-year-old Korean woman who returned to the country on January 19th from a trip to Thailand. The patient is known to have visited Bangkok and Pattaya during her trip to the Southeast Asian country. Although she showed no symptoms upon her arrival in South Korea, the patient later began to feel fever-like chills on January 25th. On February 4th, she tested positive for the coronavirus at the Jeonnam National University Hospital in Gwangju, where she remains in quarantine. Health authorities are trying to figure out how she was exposed to the virus, where she went, and who she has been in contact with.
We're disclosing the movements of the confirmed patients to let the citizens know whether they could have been exposed to the virus, so they can watch their status more closely and quickly take the necessary steps if any symptoms are found.
The Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said the first 15 patients with the virus are all in a stable condition. In fact, one of them, a 55-year-old Korean man, has been treated for pneumonia and could be released as early as this week. The health authorities have run infection tests on 607 people with symptoms. 462 of those tests have come out negative, and those people have been released from quarantine. The Korean government is also closely watching 1,318 people who have been in contact with the confirmed patients. Kan Hyung-woo, Arirang News.
The World Health Organization says the outbreak that has infected tens of thousands of people worldwide does not constitute a pandemic. A WHO official added that face masks alone are not enough to protect against the coronavirus, and instead recommend that everyone wash their hands thoroughly and properly. Lee Seung-jae with the details.
Speaking at a news conference in Geneva on Tuesday, the director of Global Infectious Hazard Preparedness at the World Health Organization, Sylvie Briand, said the coronavirus outbreak, which has killed hundreds and left tens of thousands of people sick worldwide, does not constitute a pandemic. Instead, she says the outbreak is an epidemic with multiple foci.
Currently, we are not in a pandemic. We are at the phase where it's an epidemic with multiple foci, and we will try to extinguish the transmission in each of these foci.
Addressing rumors surrounding the coronavirus, Briand says there's no evidence the virus was mutating.
No, I think maybe I know that there have been also some information saying that the virus, while spreading, is changing and mutating and so on. But so far we have no evidence of that. It's still quite a stable virus.
According to Briand, it's important for those with the coronavirus to wear a face mask in order to stop human-to-human transmission. But for people who have no symptoms, a mask itself will not necessarily protect them. Instead, she said there are other measures that need to be followed, such as frequent hand washing. The WHO has been closely working with global experts, governments, and other partners to rapidly expand its scientific knowledge on the novel coronavirus. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Prime Minister Jong Suk-yoon says South Korea will thoroughly study the coronavirus situation in not only Hubei province, but also the surrounding regions. Government and Blue House officials and ruling party lawmakers discussed the domestic status of the virus this morning at the National Assembly. The Prime Minister said they could review additional testing not only for Chinese but for foreigners from other countries. South Korea has already imposed an entry ban on foreigners who have visited Hubei province in the past fortnight. But Jong also hinted that it could later apply to visitors who travel from other regions. This comes as patients in South Korea who recently visited Thailand and Japan have tested positive for the virus. New test kits for detecting the new coronavirus have been approved here in South Korea, which is expected to speed up the diagnosis process. They will be supplied to local private hospitals starting this Friday. Kim Hyo-sun reports.
A batch of reagent test kits for the new coronavirus has been approved by the South Korean Ministry of Food and Drug Safety, shortening the detection time and recognizing suspected cases. The new kits, which have been temporarily approved out of concerns about the continued spread of the virus, identifies the virus by amplifying two specific genes. Compared to the two-stage conventional test kits, the newly developed ones only require single-step testing. Moreover, the new kits can speed up the process by reducing the time for detection to just 6 hours from 24 to 48 hours.
The new test kits have been co-assessed by the Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and Korea Society for Laboratory Medicine objectively and scientifically, and thus are reliable.
The new test kits will be available for use by private hospitals starting Friday. They will be first supplied to 50 hospitals and clinics that have been approved by the KCDC.
We expect to enhance the capacity to monitor confirmed patients on a local level by distributing the new test kits to private hospitals.
The new kits are expected to help contain the virus going forward while reducing unnecessary quarantine for people suspected of having the coronavirus. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Now, in a big step, the country's largest automaker, Hyundai Motor, is gradually suspending its assembly lines across South Korea. The company says it has to, as there are disruptions in supply from China, where many auto-related factories are shuttered due to the coronavirus outbreak. The South Korean automaker has become the first major global car maker to take such a drastic step. Kim Da-mi reports.
One of South Korea's largest car makers, Hyundai Motor, will shut down all local production lines by Friday. Hyundai Motor announced on Tuesday that it plans to gradually suspend operations at all local factories. One of the Genesis sedan production lines in Ulsan City has been temporarily suspended as of Tuesday afternoon. Hyundai's production line for small trucks has also stopped. The closure is expected to last until Monday or Tuesday next week. Tuesday's move comes as Chinese companies have halted the supply of wiring harnesses, a key component for Korean car makers. Most factories in China have extended their Lunar New Year holiday until the 9th of February due to the coronavirus. Some wiring harnesses are made in South Korea, but Korean automakers are heavily dependent on those made in China. While pledging to minimize damage by securing parts from other suppliers, Hyundai Motor will pay 70% of regular wages to its workers during this shutdown period. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
Now, as concerns grow over the spread of the coronavirus in and outside of South Korea, it's only natural that many questions are running through our heads about the virus. Will it spread quickly? Will it peter out? How deadly is it? Etc., etc. Since there is a lot of misinformation out there, our Kim Bo-kyung sat down with an expert to find out some important facts about the coronavirus.
Many people still have lots of questions about the novel coronavirus. One of the questions is whether there is a specific age group that is more likely to be infected. In a recent study of 99 patients with the coronavirus in Wuhan, China, the number of patients infected was evenly distributed, meaning that there isn't any particular age group that is more prone to catching the virus. Half of the patients had chronic medical conditions. One expert says the key factor is what activities you do.
Usually, active people are much more likely to be infected because they could be exposed to the environment with virus. But elderly people or infants who are infected are more likely to get worse or die.
Right now, the death rate for this strain of coronavirus is much lower than previous coronavirus-based diseases. Yet an expert says the death rate could reach 20% as there are many patients in a serious condition. The total number of patients has already surpassed the other types of coronavirus, and the number of new infections caused by each patient is in between SARS and MERS. The expert says this outbreak might last more than 8 months.
The virus might continue spreading for at least 8 or 9 months, but it could be possible that the period will be shorter as the infrastructure and the quality of preventive measures are much better than at the time of SARS. It is important to diagnose patients with the virus and quarantine them.
The expert adds that this virus is not an airborne infection, rather a droplet infection. The difference between these are the size of the particles that come out of one's mouth. As the novel coronavirus particles are relatively large, people more than 2 meters away are generally safe. He says that although patients without symptoms can spread the virus, those with severe symptoms spread the virus much more.
Those people without symptoms or with just mild symptoms are not the ones that spread the virus much. The contagiousness depends on the amount of the virus that a patient gives out, so patients with mild symptoms shouldn't be a priority for quarantine.
The expert says people should avoid contact with contagious people by avoiding crowds, wearing masks, and washing your hands frequently. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Okay, let's start our international news segment. In the United States, we have some results of the Iowa caucuses from the Democratic side. The announcement was delayed Tuesday after a rather embarrassing technical glitch for the party. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Yoon Jung-min. Jung-min, we hear a dark horse in the race. Pete Buttigieg is leading the race as it stands.
You're right, Mark. We now have the partial result of the delayed Democratic Iowa caucuses. Former Mayor Pete Buttigieg of South Bend, Indiana, is leading the race with some 26.9%. Buttigieg is followed by Senator Bernie Sanders with some 25%, Senator Elizabeth Warren with about 18%, and former Vice President Joe Biden with some 15%. Now it's only 62% of the actual result, but the result was somewhat unexpected. Numerous earlier polls showed Biden and Sanders as leading contenders, but Biden is set in a lowly 4th place so far, and Buttigieg tops the list. Here's Buttigieg.
A little later than we anticipated, but better late than never. Official, verified caucus results are coming in from the state of Iowa. They're not complete, but results are in from a majority of precincts, and they show our campaign in first place.
The Sanders campaign say they are not giving up until the final results. The Iowa Democratic Party apologized coding errors with their new app, which caused a delay in the reporting of the caucus results. On the Republican side, President Trump won the Iowa caucuses by a landslide. He got some 97% of the votes statewide, beating former Massachusetts Governor Bill Weld and former Republican Illinois Representative Joe Walsh, who gained around 1% of the votes. Taking to Twitter, Trump called the Democratic caucus a disaster, saying nothing works just as they ran the country. Trump added that he was the only person that could claim a big victory on caucus night. Tesla is seeing its stocks surge thanks to an upbeat buyer sentiment. Shares in the U.S. electric vehicle giant ended 13% higher on Tuesday after they hit as high as 23% during trading. That was the biggest one-day gain in 6 years. On Monday, Tesla's stocks jumped nearly 20%. The shares have been rising after Argus Research has raised the price target for Tesla's equity to $808 from $556. AirAsia CEO Tony Fernandes has stepped aside for at least 2 months as authorities probe bribery claims. Authorities are investigating allegations European plane maker Airbus paid a bribe of $50 million to AirAsia. Both Fernandes and Budget Airlines chairman Cameron Marinon have said they will step aside while the probe takes place, but they deny any wrongdoing. Fernandes, however, is expected to remain as an advisor to AirAsia.
South Korea and Japan will hold working-level talks on Thursday here in Seoul, according to the Foreign Ministry. On Tuesday, Kim Jong-han, the ministry's Director General for Asian and Pacific Affairs, will meet his Japanese counterpart, Shigeki Takeaki. It will be the country's first talks in 3 months, following discussions on their military intel sharing pact. Those happened in Tokyo in November of last year. They're expected to discuss their trade spat and the issue of compensating the Korean victims of Japan's wartime forced labor. Japanese news outlet NHK also reports the two countries could share the latest information on the coronavirus outbreak. It has been 7 months since Japan imposed export curbs on South Korea. The two countries suffered economic losses due to the months-long trade feud that followed, but it kind of came back onto Japan more than it did to South Korea. It's more painful for that country. In the final installment of our special 3-part series, our Kim Jae-hee tells us how Tokyo's trade curbs affected both economies and where exactly this feud, this spat, stands now.
It began last July when Japan imposed export restrictions on South Korea. The move sparked a long trade feud between the two neighbors, which harmed both economies. But since the curbs were imposed, Seoul has found ways to lessen its dependency on Tokyo. On the other hand, the boycott of Japanese goods in South Korea was more damaging to Japan than was initially anticipated.
The South Korean government invested in and encouraged domestic firms to localize the key materials subject to restrictions. Along with the boycott movement of Japanese products within the country, it seems South Korea has seen less damage so far.
From July to November last year, Seoul saw a 7.8% decrease in its exports to Tokyo. But the drop of Tokyo's exports to Seoul were far larger. They plummeted by more than 14%. And despite the boycott toning down over the past few months, it has undeniably left a scar in Japan's economy. South Korea's boycott has dented Uniqlo sales, and its parent firm, Fast Retailing, cut its full-year outlook for 2020 last month after worse-than-expected quarterly results. Japanese beer exports have taken a big hit, down 97.9% last December compared to the previous year. Many Japanese automakers took a blow as well. Toyota sales last year fell almost 37% compared to the year before. Due to the influence of the boycott, Seoul posted a trade deficit with Tokyo of $19.1 billion last year, the smallest amount in 16 years since the $19 billion deficit in 2003. The economic damage to Tokyo is expected to be worse, as many South Koreans have shunned travel to Japan as well. But experts also say the boycott movement has already shown signs of shrinking and will inevitably meet an end.
Boycotts can't last forever and should be used as a political signal to show willingness to solve a problem through dialogue. It shouldn't be used as a method to get one over the other side. That would only result in economic damage to both countries.
The experts stress that the two neighbors need to find a solution through dialogue and differentiate between politics and the economy so they can benefit from their close geographical location. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
A new study shows K-pop is the first word that comes to mind when foreigners think about South Korea. The 2019 National Image Survey conducted by the Korean Culture and Information Service shows 12.5% of those polled said that K-pop and K-pop singers were the first things that sprang to their mind about Korea. Korean food was second with 8.5%. The survey also showed 3 out of 4 people outside of South Korea had positive feelings about the country. BTS has broken a long-standing record on Billboard's Social 50 chart, replacing Justin Bieber's 163 non-consecutive weeks on that chart. The popularity chart ranks musical artists on various social network systems such as Facebook and Twitter, along with tracking artist page views and how often they are mentioned online. The K-pop band first appeared on the chart all the way back in October 2016. BTS stayed on top of that chart every week since July 2017, making BTS the first to top the 9-year-old chart for both 100 and 150 straight weeks. A local court has ruled in favour of football fans who demanded compensation for Cristiano Ronaldo's no-show incident last July. A district court in Incheon ruled against the FASTA, the marketing agency in charge of organising the match between Juventus and the K-League Classic All-Stars. It ordered each of the fans to be paid $312. The fans said the guaranteed appearance of Ronaldo was a fraud. The award also takes into account the fans' mental anguish caused by the no-show. A sellout crowd filled Seoul World Cup Stadium last summer for the match, but Ronaldo remained on the bench throughout the entire 90 minutes, despite fans being told he would play at least one half of the game.
Good morning. Just when we thought spring was getting underway, an icy cold snap comes thundering in to make us shiver. Cold wave advisories have expanded to more areas now, and that's including here in the capital, and upgraded to warnings in parts of Gangwon-do province. And you know, the winds are pretty gusty, so dress as warmly as possible. Yesterday's mix of wintry precipitation and light snow, though, made untreated roads slippery, so drive and walk carefully today. In fact, Seoul will remain below zero all day, Jeju only getting up to 4 degrees Celsius. And tomorrow morning will be even colder than today, with an expected low of minus 12 degrees Celsius here in Seoul. Then the cold snap continues through Friday morning, so stay bundled up. Highs, though, will hike to positive territory tomorrow, and we should notice a gradual rise in readings, with mostly sunny skies to dominate for the next few days. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for views around the world.
That's all the news and weather we have for now on this Wednesday morning here in Seoul, South Korea. Stay tuned to Arirang TV. Our next newscast is coming up at noon, midday Korea time. Until then, goodbye.